I literally was just sitting there looking at the screen like, what?
Exactly what you wanna say, what you wanna say. Exactly what you wanna say, what you wanna say.
Can we talk about sinners or can we talk about sinners? Hey everybody, Rini here. Welcome to my channel. If you're new here, if you're not, welcome back. So I just thought we could just have a little chat about Sinners, the movie. I gave you my quick out of the theater reaction when I saw it over the weekend. I'm seeing it again this weekend. I have to. That has to happen because there's just so much. There's so much that happened in this movie. And I hope that everyone else is planning on seeing it as well. If you can, I'm trying to see it in IMAX. But if you can't, any screen will do. You have to go see this movie. So I figured we could just have like a little discussion about some of the major points of the film. And, so maybe I'll just start off with my overall thoughts. I'll keep it as spoiler free as possible and then later on get into some of the spoilers. So I went into this not knowing anything because I had heard that the trailers can spoil a lot if you haven't seen the movie. So going into this, I intentionally just didn't see any of the trailers. I knew that I wanted to see this movie, and I think I've been doing that a lot recently. Like if I felt I was definitely going to see a movie, I just won't watch the trailers because I feel like nowadays the trailers give away so much. I went into this movie and it's interesting because you go into it thinking you know how it's gonna go because it's out by now what it's about, right? But for the first, I would say like the entire maybe first half of the movie, it's none of that. It's setting the scene. And this is what I said in my initial reaction is that Coogler really knows how to set the scene. He knows how to give the characters a life. He gives you a setting. He says, okay, we're going to take you out of where you are right now and put you into this world. So the whole first half of the movie, maybe the first 5/8 of the movie is just this scene building, this character development. You get to know Smoke and Stack. Smoke and Stack is played by Michael B. Jordan. They're twin brothers. And when I tell you, like, the man is so talented. Like, you can tell, like, sometimes when they do these sort of one person playing two different roles, they make the two roles so dissimilar to make it easier for the actor to be able to differentiate between the two. And it's so much harder to play twins that look the same. The aesthetics, everything was the same. Even the majority of the personality is the same, but it's just those small, subtle differences, those small nuances that made the difference, which to me really shows the level of acting that Michael B. Jordan has. Like Smoke and Stack, it's like when you know twins in real life, you can tell who's who just based on just little things, like the more you get to know them. So it's just like that. Like Smoke and Stack were very different. So they were the same person, but Smoke, I would say, was ready for all the smoke. Smoke was like, okay, what are you showing me? He was all about the money. He was all about the bottom dollar. Stack was more calculated. Stack was a little bit more reserved. It wasn't like just in your face more reserved, but he was just a little bit more. Even the timing with how they spoke was a little bit different, was a little bit more like sort of thoughtful and like more of an emotional expression than Smoke. So it's really amazing how he's able to pull that off. They did have the color tones like I don't even remember which one it was. Which one was like mostly like red in his wardrobe, and the other one was blue. I forgot which was. So we're starting off with the story of Smoke and Stack. Apparently they were working in Chicago for Capone, and they were away from the South for about 7 years, and then they came back. So I guess now we're getting into spoiler territory. So they came back with a whole load of cash, and they wanted to open a juke joint, the club. They wanted to open a club. And it was interesting to see how everyone sort of recognize them. You know, the people that they came across had different emotions when they saw them. Like when they came across this other guy, Cornbread, he was literally working in a field. Like in America in the post Jim Crow era or during Jim Crow era, a lot of the previous slaves were no longer slaves or indentured servants, but they still were a lot of people who were working in the field, like working for a living. So the Cornbread guy, he was working in the field with his wife, who was pregnant at the time as well. They knew that he must have been a person that was in need of money, and they gave him an offer to work with them in this juke joint to help them open it for the night. And another person they gave an offer to was a character Slim, played by, I think his name was Delroy. Yeah, Delroy Linda. He was amazing. He's amazing in everything he does. But he's funny. He was like I don't know, like he was like the town drunkard, right? And he's performing like he's an old band member. He plays. So they knew that money wouldn't necessarily get him because he's the type of man who survives, right? He lives in his comfort zone, and he doesn't like to really switch it up. So he offered him Irish beer. It also comes into play later on with the story, with what, you know, everything that happens later on. He offers him Irish beer, which is something he hasn't had before. And he says, oh, I just have to, I have to partake. We also meet this Chinese family, the Chows, who work in this town. And it's interesting because, and that's one thing about this movie that sets it apart from a lot of genre films. Of course, sets it apart from, horror movies, but in the fact that it touches on these different cultures that aren't necessarily spoken of in terms of the Jim Crow South. Like you have the Chinese, who were obviously there, right? Historically there because, they were brought to America to work on the railroads, but they were sort of like, and there was one scene in the movie, and that's another thing about Coogler. He's able to give you a whole narrative in like one scene. So there's one scene where Smoke and Stack go to the Chows to get them to design a sign for the party, for the club, right? So the wife, the husband sent the daughter to get the wife, and they had two stores. They had one store on the black side of town, which is across the street from the white side of town, which is two separate stores just across the street. But as the daughter leaves the black segregated store to go across the street to the white side, the white store, she can easily just traverse in between. And the wife, she says, oh, father needs you, whatever. The wife comes and leaves. So it's just like it tells a story of how the Chinese were sort of like the intermediaries between both sides during the Jim Crow South, which was historically fact. Like they were always in between. They were always sort of like straddling the fence, so to speak, in terms of navigating that whole thing. Because in the Jim Crow history is very like black and white. It's like a black and white cookie. But everything in between that sort of had to find its own way. Just like Stack had a previous relationship. So we're going into the relationships now. Stack had a previous relationship with a white woman or white passing woman. I believe like she said her grandfather was black or partially black. And back then the one drop rule was certainly still in play 100%. So she, because of her grandfather's history, wasn't even able to grow up in white society. She grew up around Stack's family. So it's a lot of that that was touched on, and we're going to come back to this later on when we start talking about Ramek. Oh boy, Ramek. So they all get together for this party, for this juke joint. You have the Chows, you have Smoke and Stack, you have all the exes there. Smoke has an estranged ex-wife who he unfortunately lost a child with. She's a hoodoo practitioner, which also plays a heavy role in this too, because there's a lot of religious themes in this movie. You have Christian, because as we know, like even though the South was riddled with slavery and Jim Crow, Christianity was really abundant, initially as justification for slavery somehow, right? And then later on, with Jim Crow and later segregation, it gave a lot of moral and spiritual uplifting to people who were marginalized during that time. There was one scene with Slim that when I saw this scene, I was like, wow, he was in the truck. He was driving with Smoke and Stack, and he was telling a story about something that happened. And you could tell it was a painful story. You could tell that it hurt him a lot. And he got to a point in the story where he was like, like thinking about the pain, like, yeah, it hurt. Like it hurt to think about it. He was just like, So it tells how, especially in terms of like Christian influence, how gospel music, also in the blues, right? Because the blues influenced gospel music around that time in terms of how it was expressed, right? So in the blues and in gospel, that it speaks to how people use music to express what couldn't be said. Like when you just have like it's like a pain, right? But it comes out in a melody. And just in that one scene, it speaks to how that's used to cover pain, to be expressive, to heal yourself, to sort of self-soothe as well. And I was just like, wow, like in it, you know, if you're a music person or if you're a spiritual person or if you're like interested in history in general, especially in the times that we're living in now, like it's just, it really shows like the through line of this movie is just like so many levels to it. And that also connects to how, and I think this is a good transition to talk about Miles Eaton and what he does with his character Sammy, because, and I believe this is his debut role. Like he's never done anything before, not anything significant, and it was just so natural to him. It just his role, playing this person who he grew up in the church with his father. He was, you know, the preacher's son. I guess he was sort of off doing his own thing. He wanted to play music. He wanted to play the blues. And of course, his preacher father was going to be like, no, like that's the devil's music. Right. So, he set out to just play music with his guitar. And Smoke and Stack gave him this guitar that they said belonged to their father. But it's like, even in the beginning of the movie, you can tell that they knew that there was something special about Sammy's gift and about what he could do. They didn't get really too much into how they knew he had this gift. It was just implied that this is just something that they know. Like if he gets this guitar and he plays, something's going to happen. And then you're sitting there wondering, like, what is this something, right? And we get to the something. We do get to the something, right? So there's something happens at this party, right? So when they open the juke joint, they're all there. The Childs are there. Smoke and Stack are there. And they know the ex-girlfriend, the ex-wife is there. Slim is there. So they're all in this place. Cornbread is there, right? So they're playing, they're dancing, you know, they're watching the money, you know, Smoke is like, oh, don't give away free drinks, right? So it comes up to Sammy, right? He is about to sing and they give him the guitar, and Slim introduces him, right? And Sammy just starts playing, right? And then Slim is like, no. You have to introduce yourself. Tell them where you're from. Tell them what you do, right? So it's like he's learning the ropes. He's learning the ropes of the ropes of the trade, right? So he starts singing, and they start dancing. They start grooving. Smoke and Stack is like, yeah, that's what it is. And then it harkens back to like throughout these little points in the movie where they have these voiceovers that tell you, like, you know, the importance of music and how it can help you to connect to your past, your present, and your future, including like any, ancestors that have come before you, right? So Sammy's he's playing the guitar, he's singing, right? And this scene, and I'm sure if you've seen the movie or you're about to see the movie, you've heard about the scene, right? The scene, the dance scene, the music scene, the scene. This scene is, how can I even explain it? It's like, I literally was just sitting there looking at the screen like, what? I was sitting there like, what is this? Okay, so let me just try to explain. Music is about frequency, right? When you strike the keys of a piano, it gives off a certain frequency when the hammer hits the string, and that's the note, right? So to me, and this is really interesting to me as well, there are a lot of theories that depending on which frequency, like people have put, water into glasses and played certain types of music, like classical music, that had a different effect on plants than, let's say, rock music or rap music, right? So music influences you as a human being. Like we are like beings that are affected by sound. So Sammy starts to play, and the way the scene is shot, and it's just, it really adds to how masterful Coogler is with direction, right? Just the way he pans, the way he shows you, like the way he focuses your eye on what he wants you to look at. So, okay, so the scene. So Sammy's in the scene, singing and playing, and you start to see the ancestors. You start to see the African ancestors around Sammy. You start to see, and this is past, present, and future. So you see like African ancestors doing traditional dance. You see present DJs, right? Hip hop, rap music, the origins of hip hop in America, which stems, if you want to go back, everything starts from this time that they're showing. This movie is set in a time that springs off everything. It springs off from the blues in the Deep South, in Jim Crow. You spring off gospel, you spring off rap, you spring off hip hop, you spring off jazz, especially jazz, you spring off everything, pop music, everything starts there, right? Bluegrass, country, like, and I'm just going to say it started, the banjo came from Africa. Okay. So let's keep it a buck. Okay. So you see African ancestors, you see the present, the rappers, they even had like people twerking, right? Which is a form of, whether you like it or not, is a form of expression when it comes to music, right? And you have the future. He had Afrofuturism in there with some futuristic guitar playing, which could have been Sam in another dimension, right? When you looked at him, right? And you also had the Chinese ancestors around the Chows, right? So it's like it wasn't just for him, it was for everyone that was in the vicinity of this place that heard this music, their ancestors came to them. And the Chinese culture is very interesting when you want to talk about the African diaspora, but I digress. So yeah, the Chows had their ancestors, Sammy had his, he had past, present, and future. And just the way the scene was shot, it goes up into the air, the roof is on fire, the roof is on fire. Right? And then eventually they all morph outside of this place and they're looking at it all burned down. And I'm just like, so is this, so it's interesting. I'm just not thinking about that scene. So this is why I had to see it a second time, because when they're all standing outside watching it burn down, what's happening there? Okay. So anyway, that's the scene. That is the scene. The way I'm describing it probably isn't doing it justice, because just the way it's shot, the way it all comes together was amazing. But anyway, they're all dancing, all their ancestors show up. And while this is all going on at the party, there's a side story happening with Remick. I believe his name, Remick, who is the I'm gonna call it the OV, the original vampire, right? Because he jumps into the frame running away from something. And this is this is also and I hear rumors that there may be spinoffs and maybe sequels. We need a few, and at the end of this I'll get into what we can further get out of this original story. But Remick is running away from, I believe they said it was the Choctaw Indians, right? The Choctaw tribe was chasing him because they knew what he was. Okay, so he ends up at a house, and then the Choctaws show up and they're just like, look, whoever you have in this house, you need to get him. And then they knew, right? So this is why we need another story about this group, about these Choctaws, and how, well, they would understand, right? Because they have their ancient stories about mythical beings. So they probably would, before anybody else, understand what Remick actually was, right? So whatever it is they did to him, they had him running. They had him scatter up out of there. So they must have knew. So he went to the house, and Remick made his way into this couple's house, right? And he said, I hope you didn't invite him in, because at this point, like, this is actually the first reference to the fact that these beings need to be invited into your house. He said, I hope you didn't let him in. She didn't say anything. This is a woman, I forgot her, the actress's name, but she didn't say anything. And then he sees that the sun is setting, right? The sun is starting to go down, and they're out. He's like, I'm not even risking it. I'm leaving. Right. So he knew what happens at nighttime with these things, which is also, to me, a reference of sundown, right? Sundown towns, which is also, like, esoterically, like, when you think about it, what happened in sundown towns in the South, right? Right. So, and when the sun goes down, what happens in this movie? So that's what I'm saying. It's so many levels. It's so many levels. Like, you know, and it was funny because I was I was upstate a few months ago, and I was driving on, got kind of lost, ended up on a road called Sundown Road. And I was like, why am I here? I was like, I do not want to be here. No, I'm not driving on nothing called Sundown, nothing. Right. So it's like, yeah. So the levels in this movie are really just incredible. So Remick turned this family, you know, to I'm gonna just call them empires, right? the empires. He turned them, and they form like a bluegrass group, and they show up to the juke joint and try to get in, but you know, like, these beings can't go anywhere because they need to be allowed in. And from there, that's when the movie flips. We go from, you know, an amazing movie just on its own right. Like, the movie could have just, like, kept going where it was going without any of the other stuff, right? And still been an incredible movie. But now we're adding in what's happening once Remick and his newly created coven shows up, right? They're trying to get into, you know, for obvious reasons, right? They're not letting them in. They try to sing, they try to do a little, you know, American Idol audition, try to get inside of the place, and they're like, nope. And it's so funny because you can kind of tell whenever someone was turned, you know, in this movie, they sort of turned into like a more, I wouldn't say sultry, but more of a scheming, like, I believe her name was Joan, right? When played by, who was that, Lola Kirk? She turned into like this temptress, right? With Stagg, like, she just, and then when she went, she's like, oh, you know, he's like, oh, I don't know you, like, you're a different person, like, and he like inherently like knew, like, subconsciously knew that she was different. He just didn't know what was different about her until it was, like, unfortunately too late. She got him, you know, yeah, things happen to up in there, you know. I think trying to describe it will really take too long. But to bring a long story short, the empires get most of everybody, right? Smokes wife, and she gave him like a little like necklace or amulet or something to protect him, and that initially protected him when he was fighting Remick towards the end. And I don't want to like get into too much of the details of what happens in this scene, you know, in the back half of the movie, but yeah, it all goes down. Stuff happens. It gets kind of crazy. But yeah, I don't want to spoil too much. And if you've seen it, you know what happens, right? You know what happens. If you haven't seen it, then I don't want to, you know, it'll take too long for me to describe scene by scene what happens, but mostly everybody gets got. Yeah, mostly everybody gets got. And it's so interesting because Remick, when he finally gets the numbers he wants with his, you know, his whole vampire clique, they start singing this Irish song. And also in terms of going back to the cultures in this movie, the Irish, when they first came here, were not exactly welcome. They weren't like welcomed in, you know, willingly like that. They had a hard time as well, first arriving to America. Not as hard as, you know, others, but you know, they had their share of dealing with trying to find the American dream when they first got here in you know, in their own way. So it was interesting how that particular background was chosen for this person. He did an amazing job. The actor's name, I think he was, did I say his name already? Jack O'Connell. Yeah, Jack O'Connell. Incredible. When he started doing that little Michael Flatley. A little whimsical. Yeah, he started doing the traditional Irish dance. I kind of chuckled, but I was just like, should I be laughing during this? But it wasn't, I wasn't chuckling because it was funny. I was chuckling because it just, to bust out with something so authentically like traditional in a scene where it's just these, you know, mythical creatures trying to attack people, was just like, it just struck me. It was just like, what? It's just like such a random thing that you would see, like traditional Irish dance. And them being in a circle, in that, you know, the Celtic circle, right? Singing that song was also an interesting choice. Yeah. So, and the fact that they all, once they were turned, they got like a hive mind. They got like a all one mind. They saw each other's memory. They saw each other's, you know, they heard each other's thoughts, which is interesting. It was like, what's driving that is like part of like the mythical ethos of these creatures. Like, we need more of a backstory on what this is. And I want to talk about the importance of Ruthie's character, played by Adrienne Ward Hammond. Incredible. The first scene where she shows up, when she first sees Smoke. Am I getting them confused? Is it Smoke or Stark? I think it's Smoke. Yeah, when she first sees him, when he's, you know, mourning the child that they lost, like she has to, in our backyard, she has the baby buried in the backyard. When they're in the house talking to each other, right, they have like this intense scene where they're sort of like going back and forth, like, and she sort of has like a presence on screen that was just like, as soon as I was like, wow, like she's like, it just gave her this power, right? There was one scene when I think she's burning some sage or something on her table behind her, but she said something, and when she finished talking, the smoke was around her body. And I was like, wait, is she smoking? Like, is her body smoking? But it's just like that framing alone, like for that 1 second, just to see like that little smoke around her was supposed to like insinuate, yeah, there's some power going on here, right? Yeah, so incredible movie. I'm going to see it again, definitely going to see it again, and I may have some more thoughts after seeing it a second time to add to this, but incredible movie. The pacing is great. I didn't feel like it ran too long at all. The after credit scene, there are two scenes. There's one mid-credit scene, which is a whole scene, a whole movie scene, which brings everything together. The mid-credit scene definitely opens the door for another movie, because some are left. Some are left. And that opens the door for another story. There's a whole bunch of stories. So let me get into what I feel like we need another story. We need a continuation. Okay, so the mid-credit, there's another credit. Okay, so there's another scene at the very end, which also ties everything together, because the question is, after all of this, did Sammy leave his faith, right? And the answer is no. The answer is no. That last scene shows that, okay, so this is what happens at the end. I'll just get into what happens at the end. Stack gets turned by the ex, right? She went out. So Joan goes out to see about this bluegrass group because they're running short on money for the club, right? So she goes out there, she listens to them sing, and then, you know, it happens, whatever happens. She comes back and she seduces Stack. They go to a room and then she gets him. And then that's when it all starts. So during the whole fight scene, they don't show exactly what happens between Smoke and Stack until the mid-credit scene with Sammy. And Sammy's older now. He's older. He had a whole career. He had a whole life. And Stack shows up with Joan. They survived that night because Joan ran out. For some reason, she was, and that's another thing, like when Ruth was killed by the vampires, when Ruth was killed, Joan had like an emotional reaction. Like she didn't want it to happen because they were very close. So I think that human part of her kind of came out at that time and she just ran out, right? We never saw what happened between Smoke and Stack when they were fighting each other. But in the mid-credit scene, we see that Stack actually survived along with Joan and they were together in like the 90s, I believe, because he showed up in some cross colors or whatever. Like it was some FUBU or cross colors, I don't know. But it was in the 90s and they found Sammy, who was playing in a blues joint, you know, and he's older. And he said that Smoke made him promise not to come after him, which is how Sammy was actually able to survive. But is that the reason Sammy was able to survive? Because at the last credit scene, there's two. At the credit scene at the very end of the credits, we see that Sammy, after he came back to the church, was singing gospel music with the guitar. So he never left his faith. So was it his faith that kept him safe all those years and kept him alive? Or was it Stack's promise? So however you want to interpret it, and there is a lot of stuff out here about Christian people saying it's too demonic. There is far worse out here. Like there is far worse out here than this movie. So, you know, however you want to interpret it is how you want to interpret it. And I think Coogler left it open for your interpretation. Because at the end of the day, this movie is all about faith, right? It's all about the story of Sammy and how he was able to come home like the prodigal son coming home to his father. I mean, Sammy showed up at the church, shredded face, blood everywhere, ripped up clothes, everything. And his father was like, come here. So to me, you know, there's a lot of controversy about, you know, people not wanting to see it because, you know, without even seeing it. But to me, there's themes of faith all throughout this movie. So anyway, that's my thoughts, you know, on this. And yeah, maybe once I see it a second time, I'll have more to add because I'm sure there's a bunch that I left out or forgot or whatever. Or maybe I'll just come out with some snippets of ideas and thoughts, you know, along the way. But yeah, those are my thoughts on this movie. You have to run and see it. You have to go out and see it. Even if you have some hesitation, you know, just as an art form, it's groundbreaking to have. And it's like the horror genre to me is just so stale and tired. I never really run out to see horror movies. No, like they just do jump scares and think that's it. Like, no, this really shows that you can add levels to horror, levels to, you know, complex stories where people who, you know, like to think and like to have different experiences with the horror genre, can actually come in and enjoy a horror film, you know? So yeah, like, yeah, see it. see the movie. But yeah, so I'll give you I'll probably have some more takes to give later on this week. But yeah, let me know what you think in the comments, and make sure you hit that subscribe button if you want to see more content like this. And I will see you next time. Bye.